Hey, welcome everybody to Libertarians Drinking Coffee Live. Yes, I am drinking coffee because I have to survive the afternoon so I can have some coffee or I'll fall asleep. So I'm very happy that you guys are giving me a chunk of your afternoon to recognize that there are libertarians all across the country trying to do their bit, trying to make change in their areas, whether it's a state or a county or wherever it might be, a local city. And I'm very lucky today that I have somebody with me who's trying to do exactly that, running for Congress in Arizona. Man himself, Jeff Metrick. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Larry.
Absolutely. And for those of you watching, please like, comment, and share. Let people know that this is happening so that people will watch and say, hey, let me ask this Jeff guy some questions and I can beat him up live. That would be awesome. But no, I'm kidding. But I do have the crazy question that I ask everybody who runs Libertarian, as nutty as it is. Why'd you decide to run for Congress and why now?
Larry, I decided to run for Congress because it's really important that we have liberty brought back, because we've seen the two-party system really just take more and more from the people, whether it's their ability to be self-sufficient by making them dependent on the state, or endless wars and more taxes that don't really fund anything. And both parties are incredibly weak right now. They're incredibly divided. And this is a time for a third-party candidate that wants people to step in and own themselves and be the liberty that they want to see in the world, because change actually starts with you. It doesn't start with
Washington. Funny thing you're bringing up, right? You're in Arizona. And I feel like Arizona is becoming one of those types of battleground states, right? Where you've got a chunk of red, but a chunk of blue, but you have people who are very kind of conservative who live in Arizona. Then people are coming from other areas who may be a little bit more blue than others. I feel like you may have an opportunity here to grab some people who are unhappy from both sides. Am I seeing that right or no?
No, you're seeing that right. There are a lot of people I've talked to in my district, both Republican and Democrat, that they don't like where the party's heading. They don't like the extreme, like the Trumpers.
Right.
Those people are going to get excluded. And honestly, I think that's going to probably tear the Republican Party in two. It's going to happen. And then you have the extreme progressives and the Democrats on the left, like the Squad and Nancy Pelosi. They don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. That's going to tear that party apart. And you have more of your traditional, under Reagan, what were called blue dog Democrats.
Sure.
They were very socially liberal, but relatively fiscally conservative. And that's what libertarianism can appeal to in them, is live your life, but it's not the responsibility of the state to make sure that you have the end result. That's your responsibility. The role of the state is to level the playing field.
Well, you talk about the American dream, right? You talked about the blue dog Democrats, which Reagan grabbed in the 80s like there was no tomorrow, right? That was a Reagan thing.
Yep.
And he grabbed lots of them. And he talked about the idea of America being that, shining city on the hill that everyone looks forward to. And you and your platform, you brought up the idea of the American dream, kind of bringing that back.
Yes.
Do you see people, is that landing? Are people like getting it, or how's that landing?
It's landing relatively well, but a lot of people don't have an idea of what the American dream is. Is the American dream, at least for me, and the reason I chose the American dream, is to live your best life and be relatively free from government oversight.
Right.
Because does someone in Washington, D.C. know how to best handle a minimum wage issue in Fargo, North Dakota? No. The living wages, they say, is $15 an hour. We're looking at different monetary policies, like
in New York City, that's not going to cut it.
No, and it's like, you look at it there. Today I saw an article, it talked about the M3, which is the amount of money. The Fed stopped reporting how much it's actually producing in terms of money. It's actually stopped reporting. And then you also have Russia too, that is looking to dump about $118 billion of US dollars out of their sovereign wealth fund. That's gone.
There we go.
So the American dream is really coming together as a community and realizing that, we can have different political ideologies, but ultimately at the end of the day, we want the same thing. We want to live our best lives and have the best life for our children, because that's what generational wealth is. And that's one thing that the Democrats have failed to do with African Americans, because I'm in a Black fraternity. I'm a member of Iota Phi Theta. And I see how Democrats have done stuff in Chicago, Detroit, San Francisco, LA, you have huge homelessness.
New York City.
New York City. You have huge homeless problems. And people are like, we need more tax money. No, what we need is people to start volunteering and actually wanting to come together and actually caring about their fellow man. It's not about government solving the problem, because government.
Yeah, but hold on, Jeff. You have it. That's not what you're. I see what you're saying, and I agree with you 100%. You know, I'm going to agree with you. I'm on the same page as you. But you brought up 4 specific pieces to your American dream, right? That you think matter for the American dream.
Yes.
And I want to cover all 4 of those, because I think some people are going to think you went, the wrong one first or the wrong one second, or everyone's going to have their own view on which is the more important one, right? But you went down these 4. The first one you talk about is the Second Amendment. That seems scary to me. Not because I don't agree with you. I agree with you. I feel it's scary because aren't people saying, oh my God, the violence and everybody shooting everybody? Isn't that a scary one? Why'd you pick Second Amendment top of the list?
Because for me, it's the Second Amendment is the most important one, especially in my district. We have a lot of shooting ranges in my district. There are a lot of people that go to ranges, and it's not the law-abiding gun owners that are the problem. It's the fact that we have more prohibition on guns, which when you outlaw something, look at alcohol, look at the war on drugs, which I'll get into in the criminal justice reform part of it, is when you outlaw something, only bad people get it. It's been proven time and again. Arizona has a very interesting law. At 18, you can get a gun. At 21, you can get concealed carry. I think that should be for the law of the land, because, as Thomas Jefferson said, an armed society is a polite society. If everyone's either open carrying or concealed carrying, as long as you haven't committed a violent offense or domestic violence, why should it matter? And for people their argument will usually be, well, what about mental health? Statistics show,
that's a common argument. You're right.
But statistics show people who are mentally ill are more likely to be the victim of violent crime than it is someone is going to perpetrate it who is mentally ill.
No, it's a valid point. And the sad part, I think, for many Americans to understand that, people who have mental health issues are far more likely to hurt themselves than others. And we aren't trying to help them and stopping them from hurting themselves, right? We're too worried about giving them guns. How about let's try to get them to help themselves, right?
Yes,
so that they don't want to hurt anybody.
That's very true. We need to treat mental illness, and we need to stop stigmatizing it.
Sure.
Because if I'm willing to, because I'm ex-military, I'm going to admit this, I have a little bit of PTSD. I also had a very traumatic childhood. I got PTSD from there as well. I'm dealing with it. I'm not a threat to anyone else or even myself. Sure. And it's like, why are we putting all these laws in place? Like, you look, red flag laws are a phenomenal example in the Northeast. I think Connecticut has one. Massachusetts has one.
New York.
Here's the thing. It's like civil asset forfeiture.
Just remember, Jeff, remember something. Anything bad, just put New York there, because we're always bad. Just throw it. Something bad's happening. It's in New York. Even if you don't know it's in New York, just say it, because it probably is.
Yeah.
That's it.
But yeah, it's like with civil asset forfeiture. You're not convicted of anything. It's just we're going to assume.
Right.
And as we used to say in the military, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and umption.
Yes, that's good. I like that.
That's the truth.
So let me then shift off of Second Amendment. I see where your head is on that. I got it. But now immigration. And the reason why I bring it immigration for you is, New York talks about immigration too, but you're a Mexican border state. Right? My border is Canada, right? No one's fighting to cross the Canadian border, except maybe criminals trying to get out. But besides that, no one's trying to, cross the border in Canada. But you have an immigration issue. You got people physically crossing that border. Why immigration number 2?
Immigration number 2 is the second most important one, for the basic fact that we need to have secure borders if we are to have a country. That's the bottom line, point blank, period. You can't have a country without secure borders. However, what is going on right now under both the Trump and Biden administration, both Democrats and Republicans, is now we have more people on the border in cages. Like, there's a hotel up the road from me that the Biden administration is paying so that they can shelter illegal immigrants here. That's a problem, because we as taxpayers are subsidizing this.
Sure.
What we need to do is we need to secure the border, have a pathway to citizenship. And also another thing on my website is for someone that marries an illegal immigrant, it should be 18 months and they have their citizenship, because it's not the role of government to say whether you truly love that person or not. That is no business of the government.
I feel like, I mean, if you say as soon as you say secure border, the first thing I think is, oh, he wants to build the wall. Are you a guy who wants to build the wall or no?
No, building the wall is a waste of money. Okay. There's other things we could do with that money in terms of infrastructure if we wanted to do that. Or we could, wild idea here, is pay down our national debt, which is about $30 trillion. What? That's just a
Who
wild
talks
idea.
about that? Oh my God.
That's a wild idea.
Crazy. And
supplement border patrol in certain places with military. We can reduce our footprint overseas, no more empire building, bring the troops home, have them do what they're supposed to do, and that's secure the border. I'm not saying build the wall, exclude people. No, let people come through, but have checkpoints where they have to come through and explain why they're coming here. Because they're just coming here because they're economically displaced or politically displaced. Yes, we should do that, because it says on the Statue of Liberty in New York City, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. But also, in addition to that, we have to start assimilating. People have to start assimilating to the values of this country, because you can't have one group of people saying, we don't want to assimilate. Like, look what's going on in Europe right now is a phenomenal example of that, of no real assimilation. You're having people that are basically forming their own cliques within countries. And that may be an unpopular position to hold, but it's the truth when you look at it. And we need to be able to do that and bring people together and realize that we are a melting pot.
But how do my worry when I hear that part, right, is not that you're incorrect. I think it's true, right? We probably do want to assimilate and get people to understand our values. I agree. How do we do that without the iron fist of government, right? Like, how do we make that happen? How do we encourage people to assimilate and to absorb our values? I like the concept. I do. My worry is that makes me think, well, then iron fist the government. No. How do we do it without that?
Well, you have the pathway to citizenship that we already laid out, and there are certain requirements. You have to at least be somewhat proficient in the language, and people can say that that's a very Republican talking point, but it's really not, because I want to be able to conversate with every American, and I don't want there to be a language barrier between us, because that creates more division within our country, and that's not what we need right now. Be able to pass a constitutional test that everyone who graduates high school has to pass. At least I know in Illinois, we had to pass a constitution test, both state and federal. Okay. And then when they do the swearing in, you take the oath, and it's those 3 steps, and you have to meet each of the requirements of those 3 steps. And that's the same thing for when someone marries an illegal, and it's 18 months, because it's 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. We can't have it be open-ended like we currently do. There has to be time. Like, you have 6 months, 6 months, 6 months.
Got it. Okay. I got it. Good. All right. So look, if you're liking what Jeff is saying, you head over to his website, winwithjeff.us. It's linked in the description. Go over there, check it out. He's got what he wants to do right there on the website. It's listed right there if you want to check it out. He's all about the pursuit of happiness. Love that, Jeff. All about that. And if you want to help him out, there's 2 ways you can. Number 1, you can volunteer. He needs volunteers. Click that volunteer button and tell him you're ready to help out. If you live in Arizona, you can actually go door knock with him, do some sign waves, whatever you want. You don't live in Arizona, no worries. He still needs social media warriors. He still needs people that share his stuff on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all that stuff. So he still needs that too. People that make phone calls, all those things. And also, if you got the cash, you can contribute. Click the contribute button. It's a red button on his website. Click that and you can give. If you think you can give a couple bucks, every little bit counts. He's got to buy signs. He's got to, he's got to buy hand pamphlets and door hangers and all those type of things. If you can help him out, please go ahead and help him out, particularly if you live in Arizona. Absolutely. So let me move on, if I could, then to, I think, the third part or plank, I guess, of your American dream. And that's the idea of criminal justice reform.
Oh, yeah.
This right now is a big deal. Like, everyone's talking about it. But what I hear most of the time in criminal justice reform is always based upon race, right? That's what it's always about. But I feel like yours isn't about race. Yours is more about things like the war on drugs and such, which in my view is also race. But I don't think anyone else actually thinks about that. They think that they're two separate pieces.
They're not.
Walk down that road with me.
Okay. The criminal justice reform part, particularly with the war on drugs, is marijuana is still a Schedule I narcotic on the federal level.
Yep.
I would propose a bill that would remove it from that because there are medicinal uses for it. I actually do use it to help deal with my PTSD sometimes. I'm going to put it out there. I'm not going to hide that.
Sure.
And
you're not the first veteran who's told me that.
Yeah. But also, when you get rid of the war on drugs, you also decrease police-civilian interaction, which put both sides at risk. And that's a huge problem because when you go into certain situations as a police officer, I know this from the military, is you're only given a limited amount of information and you're already at a certain level. You already are, just stress level is naturally in humans that way.
Sure.
When you do, have you ever done a shoot, don't shoot simulation?
Yes, of course.
And you know what it is. You may think you only fired 1 round, but you actually fired 5, but you didn't register it because your body goes into a completely different form.
Or worse, you start shooting early or late.
Yes, and if you shoot late, you might be dead.
Or you put 2 rounds in the ground as you're lifting up, or something like that. I've seen it happen too. Absolutely, all kind of crazy stuff. I agree.
And then with getting rid of marijuana being a Schedule I narcotic, you also decrease civil asset forfeiture because I don't believe states and municipalities should not live outside their budget. Because when you have victimless crime laws, all you're doing is you're taxing poor people, you're taxing middle class people. And bottom line, and this may be unpopular, and I don't care, but no one puts a gun to your head saying, you're going to do this. You chose to do it. We have information on this phone, which I'm on right now, that is more powerful computing power than what we use to put people on the moon. So you can find any information. The world is open to you. It's your choice and your responsibility to decide what you want to do with your life. It goes back to the whole freedom thing and pursuit of happiness. If people want to smoke or use psychedelics, I don't really have a problem with that. Like ayahuasca, it's phenomenal because it helped me immensely in my life. I've done a couple ayahuasca. It's a Native American, it's actually a South American medicine, and it really just opens you up and really starts cleaning out what we call the basement, where a lot of stuff we think we control a lot of our lives, and we actually don't. We only control about 5% of our lives. Everything else is how we respond to stimuli, and that's based on our past experiences. So when we get that part done, we decrease budgets, give a lot more people to keep their money. And
so hold on, I want to be clear on where you're going, just so I'm clear. You're saying the biggest issues for you is getting cannabis off Schedule I. That's the number one thing.
Yeah, that's the.
And you're saying you hit something that I like, which most people don't talk about. And I think I may bring it up more. I like what you said. You said that if you do that, then there's less police interaction, which means less risk on both sides.
Yep.
And most people don't talk about that.
And it's the same thing with traffic stops. Traffic stops are the exact same way. That's a victimless crime. That's one of the things I've really hit on is if there's no victim, there can be no crime. I mean, that just is logical. Because
isn't the traffic stop though? Isn't that scary? Or maybe I shouldn't say scary. Maybe isn't that, I don't know, maybe controversial, right? Like, what if I'm driving drunk? Isn't that a threat? Or what if I'm running a traffic light? Isn't that a threat? Or whatever. Insert thing here.
Okay, let's use the traffic light as a good example. Okay. You run a traffic light. If you don't cause an accident, who'd you hurt? Because ultimately you carry insurance. We all carry insurance because it protects us from catastrophes. That's the role of insurance. So,
but what about the idea that, for example, and maybe I'm going down the wrong road here, and correct me if I'm wrong. If I have a firearm, I legally own the firearm. I draw the firearm. It's loaded. I got one in the chamber.
Yes.
And I draw it. And I start talking with it in the air. You know what I want to do these days? And I start going off on a rant. Some people would say that's threatening.
It is.
Some people would say that that's dangerous. But in that case, though, I didn't fire it. I didn't cause a victim. Isn't it similar or no? I know I'm kind of dancing ahead of a pin here. I know I am.
Yeah.
I am.
It's similar, but at the same time, that gun, if you have a round in the chamber and you discharge that round, you're ultimately responsible for where that round lands. It's the same thing in self-defense. If I drop someone in self-defense with a pistol, but that round goes and hits someone else because it's overpowered, I am liable for anything outside of that. Because that is ancillary and collateral damage. And that's where the difference is because you can control where a car goes. The law of gravity controls where the bullet goes. When you're branching up in the air and you shoot it up in the air, it's going to come down in a parabolic arc and it's going to hit someone you don't know or hit something you don't know. You have no control over it. So that's where it becomes a little different because you have full control of your car unless the brakes go out, but that very rarely happens. Whereas if you're branching a gun, you have no control once that bullet leaves the chamber. You have no control of it.
Okay.
And that's the same thing with speeding. Speeding's the same way. I've seen people drive 120 down the expressway here, in and out of traffic, no accidents, no one's tapping the brakes, they're all flowing with it. Then what's the problem? Unless it's just a form of revenue generation. When you break down a ticket and you look at it, the actual fine itself is not a lot. It's a lot of the administrative, the court costs, funds, and all this stuff, when the actual violation is actually not that expensive. But it becomes an attack on poor and middle-class people again, which puts them even further behind the 8 ball.
I've noticed you've been hitting the poor and middle-class people a lot. That's a big issue for you, trying to help out the poor and the middle class. So let me move to the fourth part of your American Dream policy, which is the economic reform.
Yes.
Now, you touch 3 separate parts to your economic reform. One of them is, I think, what many people talk about, which is the idea of kind of removing regulations. That's a common thing, removing regulations. I'm assuming the regulations are like licensing, or is this regulations for all types of things?
We have a huge regulatory state. That's a problem. So it'd be removing license for pretty much everything. Because there's a thing that a lot of people don't talk about when they talk about new regulations on economic activity is regulatory capture. That's something businesses actually have to factor in, is how much is it going to cost me to be compliant? And as a former business owner, I'm not going to lose money to be compliant. I'm going to pass that cost on to the consumer, which in turn, most people who buy stuff in quantity are the poor and the middle class. So it in turn takes more money out of their pocket, which they're already paying more of in taxes, because they give an interest-free loan to the government when they get the money back at the end of the year. That's an interest-free loan.
So you're linking the regulations that the companies that pay, you're linking that directly to the poor and middle class paying those prices, and they're actually paying it.
Yes, they actually have to pay it because franchisees that are 90-95% of the fast food restaurants, their profit margins are 2 to 3%. When you create more regulation, that eats into more of that profit margin. And not only is it going to probably end up costing the consumer more, you're also taking money out of the entrepreneur's mouth and his family's mouth. And that's not fair, because that's robbing Peter to pay Paul. And ultimately, robbery is wrong.
So if you're liking what Jeff is saying, head over to his website. It's winwithjeff.us. If you like what he's talking about, all this stuff's right there on his website. You can go right there to issues, meet Jeff. It's all there. If you're in Arizona and you want to help him out, click that volunteer button. It's right there. Click the volunteer button. Say you want to hang out with him. He'll let you hang out with him. I'm sure I hung out with him, so I'm sure he'll let you hang out with him too. You can hang out with him if you want to. He's got to do sign waves. He's got to do door knocking, all sorts of things. He could use your help. If you're not in Arizona, no worries. You can always just throw him some cash. Hit that red contribute button and donate to his campaign. He's trying to become the next congressman in Arizona.
I'm also trying to be the first libertarian that ran as a libertarian to get elected to Congress.
There we go. Look at that. So you got a first in there. I love that. So let me go to the next piece. So you talk about tax reform.
Yes.
Everyone talks about tax reform. Tell me yours.
Tax reform is one of the simplest things we can do as a Congress. We can cut out a lot of the different 1099s, all this other stuff that people just don't understand, and it is complicated. It should be the simplest thing in the world. Income, less expenses. is what your income is. Includes charitable donations. It should be that simple. It doesn't need to be complex to where you have to go out and hire H&R Bly, have tax attorneys. It shouldn't be this complicated to run a business, to be a personal, to just have to pay taxes. And what people don't realize is in California, about 66% of your paycheck actually goes to different forms of taxes. Income tax, state tax, fuel tax, food tax, clothing tax, hotel taxes. And people don't realize that eats away at money. And it's not the wealthy that, even though the wealthy do actually, as a percentage of total receipts, pay over 90%. They actually do. It's actually, you can go and look it up. It's really cool. But what it does when people go on vacation, they have to pay a resort tax. Like I'm going to Cheyenne for the Frontier Summit next week. You know what the resort tax in Wyoming is? About 13%.
Is that right?
Yes. That's a resort tax out there in Cheyenne. Yeah. And it's just, and that's a local thing, and that's fine. They want to charge it. But ultimately what it does is people don't realize how their taxes are broken down. People talk about wanting more fuel efficient cars, going to an all electric road system. Yeah, that's great. The maintenance fund for the roads comes from the fuel tax. Here in Arizona, that's 18 cents, or it might be 38 cents. Guess what happens when you put electric cars on the road or hybrids? The fuel tax revenue goes down.
Yeah.
That's how,
and they're not going to give that up. They're going to find some other way of stealing from us.
Taxing mileage. That's what they're trying to do in Oregon right now.
There we go.
And that's ultimately a tax on, yet again, the poor and the middle class. And it's not fair because what it's doing is taxes like that, and like what we just did with like a $10 trillion bailout for Jeff Bezos. He's buying MGM for 8.5. Why? Why are we wasting money that way that we don't actually have? We're just running up more debt. There was a CBO report from earlier this year that said by the middle of this year, we'd be at almost 31 trillion in national debt. Yeah. Your taxes don't even pay the interest on that anymore. And that's a problem. We live outside our means.
All right. So you hit regulations. I like that. You hit tax law. I like that, tax reform. But you're touching what I think most people think is like the third rail. Like no one talks about this, but you're talking about it. You're talking about tort reform.
Yes.
I mean, people don't touch that. They're like, we can't talk because the trial lawyers be mad at us. But you're touching it. Tell me why tort reform.
Tort reform is another big expense for businesses. I had to carry personal liability insurance, even though all I sold was candles. And what you do with it after you buy it is completely on you. I've had people say,
I also have liability insurance, E&O too, for my business. I do too. Yep.
But we make it so easy and so litigious in society that there's frivolous lawsuits that are brought that the company didn't intentionally harm you. It was an accident. That's the thing. But people want to say it was malice, and that's how people get rich. And it's like, I'm not knocking that hustle, but don't make it easy, because then ultimately it ends up having to come out of the company's profits, and the company usually ends up passing it on to the consumer. We go back to even criminal justice reform, where you have qualified immunity. The city still ends up paying for when a cop does something wrong. Look at Louisville, look at Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Look at those places that have to pay millions of dollars out. Yeah, it sucks. And it causes more harm to the taxpayer. Because, yeah, this family got money, but it came from everyone else. And everyone else wasn't at fault. It was one person. And that's where we need to have that reform. Qualified immunity needs to go. It needs to go back to what it originally was. It originally was if a police officer or a public official acted in a way that would be deemed rational and logical, they had that immunity, which is fair. But they expanded it out so far that it's become ridiculous that they'll say anything is qualified immunity when it's not. Shooting a dog behind a gate is not qualified immunity.
So tort reform, in your view, includes ending qualified immunity?
Yes, because cities are technically corporations. They're incorporated.
Okay. So it includes that. But does it include something like, and when I hear tort reform, I always think of things like either one of two things. Saying that certain types of lawsuits are not valid in some way, right?
Yeah.
And or some kind of cap, like saying you can only give X dollars for a Y problem. Do you include any of those in your tort reform?
I would. I'm going to do more research because, like you said, my election isn't until next year, until
Right.
2022, November 8th. And I'm fleshing stuff out but I'm putting it out there what I'm going to be running on, and it's going to get fleshed out more and more. And I think that's only fair.
Mm-hmm.
But that is very true that there needs to be caps because in order to sue someone, you have to be able to at least prove legitimate malice on its surface. It has to pass a smell test.
And damage.
Yes. It's like the Gorilla Glue girl. Jesus, that was. It says on the bottle not to do it, and a lawyer took the case for free to try to sue Gorilla Glue. It's like, no, like why? It says on the label, do not apply to skin. Your hair is skin. So you think it would figure it out that, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. Oh, it looks good. It doesn't move.
Well, it did look good. I mean, when she had it flat, it did look good.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, like my hair's flat with gel, but I can jump in the shower and wash this off, and it's done.
Yes, absolutely.
But she ended up, and it became a news cycle, and it was a nothing burger at the end of the day. And it's like, if you believe you're wrong, like I don't have a problem if you starting to go fund me to say, yeah, I was wrong. And if people want to donate, I say, great. That's their choice. It's their money.
Yep, I agree. Maybe you want to help her get an operation to get a new headdo or whatever.
And the funny thing is, there's actually a plastic surgeon in California that volunteered to do it for free.
There we go.
Problem solved. Why did you need to go after the company? Because you ultimately made the decision. It's like drinking too hot coffee.
There we go.
That's on you. Because once you take it from the person, then you're in possession of it and you're in control of it.
Let me grab a couple comments if I can. Jim says, if true liberty was how this country ran, there would be entire countries wanting to follow suit.
Yeah.
Well, I think that goes right back to the idea of, being the American dream, right? Wanting people to come here and find their dream, right?
Yes. And live their best life as long as they don't force other people to subsidize it. This is not fair to make it's not fair to make you, Larry, or me have to subsidize something we don't agree with. It's not fair.
There we go. Corey says, Biden is taking more money from the poor and middle class. Biden makes the rich get richer.
Yep.
I don't know if it's just him, though. I think a lot of people are doing that.
It's Democrats and Republicans because they both become very bloated on taxpayer money. I'll give you an example. In the 2005 transportation bill, Dennis Hastert from my state of Illinois was Speaker of the House. Him, his wife, and business partner bought a bunch of land that was more or less worthless. They built the 390 extension.
Hold on, wait. You said my state, Illinois. I thought you were running in Arizona.
I'm from Illinois originally.
Oh, okay. You scared me for a second. I thought I had the wrong state. I'm like, wait a minute. I thought you were an Arizona guy.
No.
Okay, good. Okay.
No, from my home state of Illinois.
Okay.
But now Arizona is my home state, and I love the state. Beats Illinois.
Good. I'm just making sure that I didn't mess up. Okay, good.
Yeah. But he bought the land. They built the 390 extension within a couple miles of the land, and he was able to turn around and sell it for millions of dollars. Him and his business partner cleaned up. And when you look at it, or a home in North Dakota that was an actor's home, they got $500,000 to refurbish it, and the town doesn't even have 5,000 people in it.
Wow.
And that's the thing. That's what politicians do. They look at stuff. They look, how can I bring more money back to my taxpayers, back to my constituents? Yeah, that's great if you want to buy elections and buy votes. I'm not in the business of buying votes. My ideas stand on their own. It's like really good barbecue. The meat should stand on its own. It
I like that.
Doesn't need sauce. But if you have to,
I love that. Dustin says the border security issue main problem is the losing war on drugs and cartels. People often bring that up, right? Like one of the reasons why the border is a problem is because of the war on drugs and such. Do those overlap for you or no?
They overlap to a certain point, but ultimately we all make our own decisions in our lives, and we're ultimately responsible for our own actions. If no one has a gun to your head or physically says you're going to do this, then it's your choice. Ultimately, you made the choice.
Okay.
So, but there does need to be that interdiction, but we need to drop, at least first off, is the marijuana.
Sure.
Put
Cannabis
that
Schedule
down.
1.
Yeah, that'll knock it down that'll knock a huge part of it out, because now it's like, okay, cool. And plus, it's not the business of the federal government to Schedule 1 narcotic that, when it should be a states' rights issue, because that falls under the 10th Amendment, because the 10th Amendment to the Constitution states those powers not enumerated in this document are reserved unto the state and the people. And that's not a job of the government. That's a job of the local governments to make that
Desiree
decision.
says, so glad to see others making a difference. Look at you. You got a fan. I love that. It's awesome. So is there anything, I mean, before we wrap this up, we've gone about a half an hour. Is there anything that I didn't talk about that we should bring up before we wrap this up?
Just really the wars of empire that we've been fighting. We have this huge problem of wanting regime change, but we don't realize military regime change never works. Look how well it worked in '53 in Iran when we put the Shah in power, which is why our embassy was the only embassy seized and held for so long, was because the Shah was a brutal, brutal dictator that we put in power.
Absolutely.
And then after the Ayatollah came to power, we backed Iraq in the war against Iran for 8 years. We funded the Mujahideen, which was the precursor to the Taliban, when they were fighting the Soviets for us. We do all this stuff, and then we wonder why stuff happens to us, because we meddle in other people's business. How would we like it? A lot of people don't realize that in '92, we had a deal with the Russians after the fall of the Soviet Union that we would not expand NATO any further east than Germany. And we did. That would be, and then we put bases there. The funny thing is we would lose our crap if Russia put bases in Mexico, China put bases in Mexico.
We almost went to war when they had a base in Cuba in the 60s.
Yes, and it's like
absolutely.
And it's like, that's the rank hypocrisy we have in this country is it's okay as long as I do it, but you do it, no, that's bad. No, it's not. That's not how this works. If you want to stand true on your principles and have principles, you are not a hypocrite about it.
I love it.
You say, this is what I believe, this is what I do. And they have to be congruent. If they're not, then people are going to see right through it, because people have gotten to the point in this world that they can see through the bullshit that politicians put out. That's the thing that I want to do. I'm going to be authentically me. You're going to see me, warts and all, because I don't want to hide anything, because then that just means, oh, he hid something from us, means he's lying about other things. No.
There we go. Absolutely.
You can come at me, and that's fine, because I'm going to answer your question honestly. I'm not going to obfuscate like politicians like to do. Ask me a question, I answer. If I don't know the answer, I will be like, I'm sorry, I don't know this answer right off the top of my head, but I will definitely reach out to you. Please go to one of my staff, give them your contact information, and I'll personally reach out to you within a week with a response.
I love it. So guys, if you like what Jeff is talking about, head over to winwithjeff.us. Check him out. If you like what he's saying, if you want to help him out, click that volunteer button if that's what you want to do, or click the contribute button and throw him some money so he can move this forward. He's doing the smart thing. He's running early. That's a good thing. We can support him now. If nothing else, you can click on his Facebook page. I put the link there. Like his Facebook page, if nothing else. But if you can help him out, please help him out. It'd be great. Jeff, I want to say thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on, Larry. It was really nice meeting you in California. And I hope Jeff Hewitt wins. That would be awesome. Hope he does.
That's another cool Jeff. We got a bunch of cool Jeffs. I like it. That's good. Guys, thank you so much for giving me a part of your afternoon. I will see you all later on today. Or